They told him to take it off, in open court. A decorated war hero, a black man in full-dress uniform, was ordered by a sitting judge to remove the one symbol that didn't just represent his sacrifice. It represented the lives of those who never came home. He wasn't there to testify. He hadn't said a word. But the sight of him, upright, silent, with a Medal of Valor pinned to his chest, was enough to ignite something in that room, discomfort, pride, and a quiet storm waiting to break. What happens when a man who has walked through war refuses to bow in a courtroom? And what if the very system sworn to uphold justice tries to erase the meaning of honor itself? Before you judge him, or the judge, hear what really happened. Was it about race, power, pride, or something deeper? Stay with us. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that like, share with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know your thoughts below. Because truth doesn't whisper, it walks in silence. The courtroom was still when he walked in. Shoes polished, spine straight, uniform crisp in a way that made even the gallery sit up. Isaiah Cole didn't need to announce himself. The medal on his chest did that for him. Bronze and blue, glinting under the dusty overhead lights of the Chatham County Courthouse. He stood not as a defendant, not as a witness, but simply as a presence, quiet, immovable, and reverent. He had come to support the family of Marcus Green, a fellow soldier whose veteran benefits were being challenged after death. But it wasn't the case that caught the room's attention. It was him. And within seconds it became clear that his presence unsettled one man in particular, Judge Harris. His eyes narrowed. His fingers tapped the bench once, twice. Then sharply, "Remove that medal. This is a courtroom, not a parade." The words dropped like a hammer. The gallery froze. Isaiah didn't flinch. He simply inhaled, eyes steady, gloves folded before him. The silence wasn't defiance. It was memory. And memory doesn't move for fear. The room didn't breathe. Not when the order fell. Not when the echo of it bounced off the courtroom walls. You could feel it, a sudden shift, like air turning heavier. Isaiah stood motionless, yet you could tell something changed behind his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise a hand. He simply lifted his chin, a fraction of an inch, and looked straight ahead. He wasn't looking at the judge. He was looking past him, like through glass, like through time. Like he could still see the smoke rising off a convoy ambushed in Kandahar. The last look in a brother's eyes before silence fell. In the gallery, a woman clutched a worn photograph, a young soldier, smiling, alive. Her son. Others leaned forward, some blinking slower now, absorbing the weight of what they were witnessing, the uniform. The silence. The stare that didn't challenge, but didn't yield either. Someone in the back whispered, "That's Cole." No last name needed. Just the reverence of it. A story passed between veterans like legend, quietly, without headlines. He was the one who stayed behind when the perimeter collapsed. The one who carried Private Hill on his shoulders when the medevac refused to land. The one who refused the first flight home, because others hadn't made it yet. And now here he stood, in a courtroom, not on trial, but on edge. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he reminded the room what right looked like when it cost something. His stillness was not pride. It was purpose. You could almost hear it beneath the stillness, the thunder of memory, the ache of discipline. He stood not in protest, but in presence. As if to say, "I am here, and so are they." And then there was Judge Harris, adjusting his robe, clearing his throat, tapping the bench harder. But it was too late. The room had already decided. Something sacred had entered, and no robe, no title, no gavel was going to erase it. Because when a man carries the memory of the fallen, no one tells him how to wear it. Not even the law. I said remove it, the judge snapped again, sharper this time, less law, more ego. His voice cracked the quiet like a whip, but it didn't move Isaiah. Not even a blink. The man stood rooted, not in defiance, not in anger, but in something older, something deeper. Dignity. History. Memory. Isaiah's voice came slow, steady. "Your Honor," he said, each word polished, like the brass on his chest. "This is not a decoration. It is a promise, a burden, a prayer." His tone was low, but the weight of it filled the room. "I do not wear it for pride. I wear it because there are names I can't forget." Names carved into silence. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "This isn't a memorial, it's a court of law. And in this court, I decide what's permitted." Isaiah paused, his breath calm. "Then perhaps, sir, it is this court, not the medal, that has forgotten what justice means." A whisper moved through the gallery like wind in leaves. Some turned their heads. Some sat taller. And others simply stared at Isaiah like they were seeing something they'd missed for years. Judge Harris slammed his gavel. "Enough. This is a courtroom. You will obey its decorum or be held in contempt." Isaiah didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, voice unwavering, "the men I stood beside didn't die for silence. They died for meaning. And this medal doesn't belong to me. It belongs to them." A bailiff shifted uncomfortably. A woman in the back let out a quiet breath that sounded a lot like grief. And through it all, Isaiah remained motionless, his presence louder than the gavel, stronger than the law. Because some honors once earned are never subject to permission. From the back of the room, a chair scraped against the floor, soft at first, then louder, jarring. All heads turned. A man, older than most, rose slowly. His back was curved, one leg stiff from something long ago, but his chest still carried the squared weight of command. His suit was outdated, but the silver star pinned to it hadn't dulled with time. He walked with a cane, but it wasn't the cane that steadied him. It was purpose. "I served with that man," he said, loud enough to hush even the murmurs. "Name's Colonel David Farrer. Mathers, United States Army, retired. I led Isaiah Cole's unit in Kandahar." He paused, letting the silence stretch, then fixed his gaze on the judge. That medal didn't come from ceremony. It came from fire, from blood, from a day when Cole carried 2 wounded soldiers through enemy fire, knowing he wouldn't make it out himself. The judge shifted. "Colonel, you're not on the docket today." "No, but I'm in the right room," the old man said, not missing a beat. "And you need to hear this, whether you want to or not." The courtroom held its breath. The colonel turned to the gallery. "That medal wasn't handed to him. It was earned when Isaiah refused evacuation until every man in his unit was accounted for. He bled through his boots. He carried death on his back and didn't complain. That's why he wears that medal. Not for vanity. Not for status. But because the men he couldn't save still weigh on his chest every damn day." He turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, telling this man to remove that medal is like telling a widow to forget her husband. It's not protocol. It's cruelty." Judge Harris opened his mouth but didn't speak. His hand hovered near the gavel again, unsure now. The room wasn't his anymore. Then came another voice, soft, broken. A young woman, mid-30s, holding a child on her lap. "Isaiah was with my brother when he died. He wrote to us after, told us things the military didn't. He stayed in touch. He came to the funeral. My father didn't, but Isaiah did. The gallery stirred, not in chaos, but in awakening. Because in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't about a medal. It was about memory, about sacrifice, about who gets to define respect in a room built to deliver justice. And respect today was not wearing a robe. It started with one hand. An older man in the second row stood slowly, removing his veteran's cap and pressing it to his chest. His expression wasn't angry. It was resolute, grounded, like a man who had seen too much to let this moment slide by without witness. Then came a second. A woman in a floral blouse, tears quietly tracking down her face, rose beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said more than any word could. Row by row they followed. Veterans, widows, sons and daughters of the fallen. No one shouted. No one moved toward the bench. They just stood. Silent. United. The kind of silence that speaks of burial flags and folded prayers. The kind that wraps around pain and turns it into strength. Judge Harris looked out over the gallery, his eyes flicking left and right. "I said sit down," he barked, this time louder. But it was too late for commands. The air had shifted, and everyone knew it. A young man in uniform, marine dress blues, barely old enough to shave, stood next. His hands trembled slightly, but he looked straight ahead. "Sir," he said, quietly but clearly, "I came here today to observe legal procedure. What I've seen is something else entirely." Then, as if drawn by the same thread, a woman in the back reached into her purse and lifted a photograph high above her head. It was weathered, worn at the edges, a black soldier in combat gear, mid-laugh, sand in his beard. "My son served under that man," she said. "He didn't come home, but he told me before he left, 'If anything happens, Mom, don't cry for me. Just trust Cole.'" Her voice cracked. "And I do. I trust him more than I trust this courtroom." You could feel it. Something crumbling behind the bench. Not authority, but arrogance. Not law, but the illusion of control. Isaiah hadn't moved an inch. He didn't have to. The room had risen for him. Not because of his medal, but because of what he stood for when everyone else sat in silence. Respect. Integrity. Memory. And in that moment, those things mattered more than any gavel ever could. Judge Harris's face flushed a deep red, part outrage, part disbelief. He slammed the gavel again, harder this time, the sharp crack echoing through the chamber like a warning shot. "This is a disruption," he shouted. "Everyone sit down or you'll be removed from this courtroom." But no one moved. Not a single person. Not even the bailiffs. The judge turned toward the officers near the door, gesturing furiously. "Do your jobs." The two bailiffs exchanged glances. Quick, tense. One of them, Officer Benton, a white man with salt and pepper hair and 30 years of service under his belt, stepped forward, then stopped. His gaze locked with Isaiah's for a long moment. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "Respectfully, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This is above protocol." "What did you say?" the judge barked. "I said," Benton repeated, louder now, "I will not lay hands on a man who has bled for this country. Not today." A gasp rippled across the room, but it wasn't surprise. It was relief, like someone had finally said what they were all thinking. The judge pointed a trembling finger at the second bailiff, a black woman named Davis. She too stood still. "You're refusing a direct order?" Harris growled. She nodded once. "I'm following the right one." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy. It was clean. Resolute. the kind of silence that sweeps out the pretense and leaves only truth. Harris looked down, then up, as if seeking an exit he couldn't find. His mouth opened, but words failed him. For all the power of his bench, of his robe, of his gavel, he was alone. And Isaiah still hadn't spoken, still hadn't moved. He didn't need to. Because when a man's presence alone commands the loyalty of strangers, it's not rebellion, it's remembrance. And the courtroom, for the first time that day, began to feel like sacred ground. Not because of the judge's authority, but because the people in it chose to honor something greater, something earned, something no court could ever truly control. Isaiah finally moved, but not in defiance, not in anger, just a simple step forward, as if making room for the weight of the moment to settle in its rightful place. His eyes never left the judge, but they weren't challenging. They were steady, tired maybe, measured, but above all, honest. "With all due respect, sir," he said, and the room fell even quieter than before. "You may control this room, but you do not control what this medal stands for." His fingers lifted slightly, just enough to brush the edge of the Medal of Valor on his chest. "This isn't about me. This isn't even about protocol. It's about the weight I carry, the names I remember, the men I buried, not with flags, but with my own hands." His voice didn't rise, but it thickened, like every word had passed through 100 sleepless nights before it made it out. "I don't wear this for glory. I wear it because some of us came home, and some of us didn't. And those of us who did, we never really left." The judge tried to interject, but Isaiah held the space. Not with volume, with gravity. "You think I wear this to provoke you?" he asked softly. "Sir, I wear this so that when my knees finally give out, I know I stood every minute I could, carrying their memory." A woman in the front row began to weep, not out of pity, but reverence. Isaiah's hands remained still, clasped in front of him, white gloves against deep blue. "This medal was not given to me lightly," he continued, "and it will not be removed lightly, least of all because it makes someone uncomfortable." He paused, letting the silence breathe. "You may strike my words from the record. You may even hold me in contempt, but you will never erase the blood that made this metal shine." And with that, he said no more. Because sometimes the deepest truths don't need to be argued. They just need to be spoken, once, with your whole being behind them. And the rest is silence. The silence didn't last. Not when the first phone camera lit up, then the second. Within seconds, the quiet reverence in the room was joined by a new kind of hum, the digital kind. Screens recording, thumbs trembling, hearts pounding. Not out of spectacle, but out of something raw, witness. People weren't just watching history, they were capturing it. They were becoming its guardians. And like wildfire, it spread. Clips of Isaiah's words appeared online within the hour. No filters, no commentary, just truth, spoken in a voice that refused to flinch. "You will never erase the blood that made this metal shine." That line alone looped over millions of feeds. Some called it defiance, some called it dignity, but everyone felt it. By sundown, hashtags were trending. Stand with Isaiah, # honor in silence, # this is valor. Veterans across the country began sharing their own stories, of medals worn quietly, of battles fought long after the uniform was folded away. Gold Star families posted photos of their lost sons and daughters with one simple caption: "He speaks for them." Local news picked up the story, then national, then global. But it wasn't the virality that mattered. It was what it stirred. At churches in South Carolina, Candles were lit. In VFW halls in Detroit, old men sat straighter in their chairs. At bus stops in Denver, strangers nodded to each other in unspoken solidarity. Not for Isaiah the man, but for what he represented. Sacrifice without complaint. Strength without ego. Memory without permission. And back in Savannah, the courthouse doors remained shut the next morning, not due to protest, but to prepare for something bigger. A hearing, an investigation, a reckoning. Because when justice forgets to bow to honor, the people remember for it. And this time, the people were louder than any gavel ever could be. Isaiah didn't ask for a movement. He didn't plan to inspire one. But when a man walks with silence and conviction in the same step, the world will follow, even if it has to learn how to walk slower, quieter, and with more weight. The resignation came not with a press conference, but with a letter. Typed, brief, unsigned at the bottom. Judge Harris stepped down the following week, citing increasing public pressure and irreconcilable differences with the court of public opinion. But the truth hung heavier than any legal phrasing could disguise. He wasn't forced out by scandal. He wasn't caught in some dark secret. He fell because he failed to understand something sacred, something too many had died to protect. The courthouse remained silent the day the news broke. No crowds. No speeches. Just the sound of the flag outside flapping against the wind and the whisper of reporters packing up their microphones. Inside, a clerk quietly removed the nameplate from Harris's bench. The empty chair looked smaller now, less powerful. Just a seat. Just wood and leather, never capable of holding what it once tried to silence. Some defended him still, said he was upholding courtroom decorum, said Isaiah had broken rules. But even they said it with hesitation now, eyes lowered, like they knew they were defending the technical, while the moral had slipped away. A retired judge from Atlanta wrote an op-ed. The law is nothing without the soul of those it serves. And in that courtroom, it was the soul, not the statute, that was on trial. Others were less gentle. He tried to shame a hero, one post read, and shamed himself instead. But Isaiah never commented. He never posted. He never gloated. When asked by a local reporter for a statement, all he said was, "I've still got names to carry." And then he walked away. No fanfare. No speech. Because sometimes the loudest vindication is the kind that needs no words at all. And as the bench sat vacant and the walls forgot his name, the echo of that courtroom remained. Not in disgrace, but in the quiet victory of a man who refused to bow, and a country that, for once, rose to meet him. The morning was still, the kind of stillness that only lives in places where silence is sacred. Golden Pines National Cemetery stretched out beneath a soft gray sky, rows of white stones standing in perfect formation, like soldiers at eternal attention. The mist lingered low, hugging the ground, as if the earth itself didn't want to let go. Isaiah Cole walked slowly, his pace measured, not from age or injury, but from reverence. 21 steps. Stop. Face east. Pause. Turn. 21 steps back. The ritual didn't ask for applause. It demanded presence, precision, respect. He was back where he belonged. No cameras followed him here. No reporters. No viral videos. Just the wind moving through the pines and the faint sound of boots brushing gravel. His uniform was the same, pressed to near perfection. His gloves still white. His face still unreadable. But his presence, now deeper, heavier, as if carrying not just memory, but meaning. Near Plot 14, Section B, he paused just a beat longer. That was Marcus Green's grave, the friend he came to honor in court, whose benefits had nearly been stripped. A folded flag rested at the base of the marker, placed there by someone earlier that morning. Isaiah adjusted it gently, without a word. He didn't need words. They knew. And as he resumed his march, something remarkable happened. Not thunderous, not sudden, but real. A group of visitors, scattered across the field, began to stand. Slowly, silently, some with hats over hearts, others with heads bowed. Not because they recognized him, but because they understood what he stood for. And when he reached the end of his steps, turned and faced the horizon, the clouds finally parted, just enough to let a sliver of light touch the metal on his chest. No, Isaiah Cole never asked for justice. He became it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of honor the world needs more of. Quiet, humble, unwavering. The kind that doesn't need permission, only purpose. The world salutes loud, but the fallen are remembered in whispers,